Good morning. Thank you for coming back after coffee. I realise I'm not as exciting as the Miro product team, so thank you for returning. As Amy gave in the introduction, the reason why I've been asked to come and talk to you today is to really talk about the journey that we've been on to become an AI native organisation. Now, that's a bit of an overused term, so what I'm going to do over the next couple of slides is kind of unpack this for you. And don't worry, I will mention how Miro is relevant as we go on this particular journey. So I thought I'd start off by explaining who we are, tell you a little bit more about Endava as a company, what we've been doing over the previous couple of years, what we made. It's always exciting to share the things that you actually make. How did we do it? How were we able to use Miro and various other tools to help us do what we've done? And then probably one of the things most people are interested in the room is what have we learned on this journey? So, who are we, Endava? Now, you would expect from someone like myself to come up here and talk about the fact that, we're a consulting company, we build this, we have all of these exciting clients. But fundamentally, for the last 25 years, what we've been doing is getting great engineering talent to work with clients to deliver great outcomes. So we always talk about how technology is our how and people are our why. So the reason why I could go incredibly talk to customers like MasterCard and others is because we would have great people who would be doing the work. And I don't just talk about developers or engineers, I'm talking about creative services, project managers, testers, everybody inside the organization who could do this. So we're about 11,000 people. As Amy said, we're dotted around the world. And I've been there for 12 years. I've been there for quite a long period of time. And about 3 years ago, I was very privileged to be asked by the CEO to become the CTO. And I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. This is top gig. I'm going to be the CTO. I get to make really important decisions. And about 3 or 4 months into my new role, pretty much every single conversation that I had was, well, we don't need IT services companies anymore. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then they'd come back and they'd ask again, and they'd make another statement. And basically, ChatGPT had become the zeitgeist of the day. And everybody believed that there was going to be no need to be able to use companies like ours, because everything that could possibly be achieved could be done inside a company with people like you and others and everything else. So I would say that we had what I would refer to as a bit of a dinosaur moment. So clearly the meteorite has sped through the sky, it's kind of crashed over there and this big white flash has gone off. And we had to make a decision. Did we want to be the dinosaurs to just kind of put our heads back down and carried on eating the grass? Or do we want to be the tiny little mammals which are going to evolve and kind of like plot our path as we move forward? So we had a pretty big decision that we had to make. And this was about two and a half years ago. And so what we decided to do was to think about how do we actually reinvent the company. So what do you do when you have to go about reinventing a company? You create a program. Yeah, it's change management. It's not very exciting, but fundamentally that's the way that these things work. And what we decided to do was really think about how can we invent the next version of our company. Number one, give it a name. Trust me, that took 3 days for us to actually agree on the name. And my personal favorite was not chosen, but we did end up with the Keystone program. And fundamentally, what we had to do with this program of work is look at everything that we did as an organization and think about how can we use AI to help us be better. But the most important thing about this activity, and there's a closing slide about this at the end, was we weren't looking to use AI technology on top of an existing process and look for a 10 or 15% incremental improvement. What we were trying to think about was, well, if I use AI, how does this completely challenge the way that I work? So we took our company, this is an eye chart, no one at the back of the room will be able to see this, don't worry. And basically we said, right, there are going to be 6 streams of work, and we're going to look at how we run the business. So how does our legal team use AI? How does our finance team use AI? We're going to look at the core of our organization. So about 8,500 engineers, and we're going to say, how do they go about doing their job? Whether it's design, whether it's writing the code, whether it's doing testing, strategy, etc., etc. But equally, it's really important that you think about your people inside your organization. So what have we got to look at when we're hiring people? What have we got to do when we're doing talent acquisition in the market? We're a business. We have to sell things. How do we help our people explain and sell why we are different? And all of the great things that we've done for the last 25 years are still going to be relevant in the next 25 years. And last but not least, I get to run our internal department, which IT department, which means aside from people always telling me the Wi-Fi is really bad in our office, means that I am responsible for all of those systems that everyone else is relying upon, really boring procurement systems, timesheets. And so I have the same challenge like every other CIO in the world in terms of how do I make them more efficient? How do I make them more accessible for the people who are within the organization? Now, I'm going to focus on, this is a great chart, I love this chart, it's far too busy, but I will always use it because I like it. We learned a lot of things. So by taking this approach of being client zero, being the first people to experiment on ourselves, we kind of said, right, go and use the tools, go and find out what's available, go and kind of like download Copilot, go and install. I mean, Claude Code and all of these tools didn't really exist 2 years ago, 18 months ago. So whenever a tool came out, go and experiment. And what we discovered, and this is quite a focus on an engineering perspective, but I'll make it relevant for creative and other skills, was the fact that we saw 3 stages when it came to the adoption of AI technology. So number one was kind of like a bit of an assistive help. And here we're thinking about little code completion. So I write something and it gives me a little suggestion and I look at it and I go, yes, I'll accept that, or I won't accept that. Here's an interesting statistic, and I'm happy to share it because it's about 18 months out of date. We deployed 4,500 licenses of GitHub Copilot to our engineering team, and we're like, yes, awesome, we've given tools to people. And what happened was we collected the data. 70% of the suggestions made by AI were never accepted by a human developer. So you're like, well, that's not very good. Okay, we've got a problem. So then we go on to the second stage of AI adoption, which is a kind of what we call collaborative. So this is going a little bit beyond that kind of like code completion side of things and starting getting to the point where you're going, can you help me reason about my code? Can you tell me whether I'm doing the right amount of testing? Can you summarize the document? And that was our kind of like second stage. Got a little bit more productive and we're like, oh, I think we might be onto something here. Guess what? Tool landscape, everything is evolving in front of us and new tools are emerging all of the time. And then finally, agents really began to deliver. And when we started using agents, we began to saw the power of a human directing an agent to do work. So we think about the commentary from earlier, people to people, people to agent, agent to agent. When we started to see that people to agent interaction start happening, that's when we really, really started to see productivity and things change for the vast majority of the engineers that worked inside our organization. Now, this incredibly busy slide also made some other interesting observations, which was you could probably use AI in an assistive and a collaborative fashion if you're doing a waterfall project or an agile project. But actually, when you started using agent to agent and human to agent collaboration, a lot of the practices that people are used to doing today, I do a stand-up, I have a fortnightly sprint, I do X, I do Y, that all starts breaking down because the people who are doing the work are actually agents. So what would it mean? Do I have to invite my agent to my stand-up in the morning to ask what tasks it completed yesterday? So what we began to describe was, well, there must be this thing, the other side of Agile, where when we can actually start coordinating all of these agents, we start seeing huge productivity improvements. And that's where we started to coin the phrase flow. Now, around this time was also the time when Miro very kindly invited us over to Amsterdam because we were kind of like, we really need to sit down and start writing this down because how do we start sharing it with everyone if we don't do it? And so it was really, really ironic for me being in a room, showing this diagram, showing it to some people who are inside this room, and we kind of established this word flow as being a really important way of thinking about what happens when you get agents to agents interacting with each other. And so, off the back of that, kind of like, let's go away and let's think about what is it that we've created. We came up with this methodology, this approach that we refer to as Dava Flow. Now, let's unpack this a little bit. This is about an engagement lifecycle. So for an IT services company, an engagement lifecycle is from the first conversation that you might have with a client all the way through to having something sitting in a production environment somewhere. And Dava Flow is about how can I think about that process? How can I use AI across all of those various stages? And when you start talking about things like methodologies and engagement life cycles, half the room leaves and goes and gets a coffee. But the other thing that happens when you work for organizations like banks and payment systems and insurance companies is they start talking about, well, is this reliable? I've heard about hallucinations. The last thing I want is a hallucinated insurance return. How are you going to stop that from happening? So when we were describing and defining Dava Flow, we had to think about how can we embed all of that governance, all of that collaboration, capture all of that insight that's provided by humans and make it available in a single repeatable process. So what we didn't do is say no humans. So this is still very much about having humans inside of the loop. But Dava Flow, from our perspective, is built for this post-agile world. We've spent 25 years being great at having agile teams delivering systems. In fact, if anyone's used their contactless payment today, then there's a high probability that it's gone through a system that Endava helped deliver for one of our clients. So we know how to do agile, but now we're definitely operating in a post-agile world. Let's use AI everywhere. You'll see in a little bit, this goes from a salesperson, but this could equally be how can we brainstorm ideas, user interfaces, prototypes, how can we bring all of those things together so we can have a good context to move from stage to stage to stage. Everything that ever happens in any interaction we've identified as important in terms of capturing a signal. And people kind of look at me and go, what do you mean, a signal? And you're, well, it could be the transcription of a meeting you had. It could be a photograph. It could be a piece of paper that you've scribbled on. You'd be surprised the things which actually generate true signals when you start putting AI and you're using it end to end. The last comment I'll make, and please everyone in Miro look towards the wall for a second, Dava Flow is tool agnostic. So if you think about an organization like ours, we will go to different companies and they will tell us that their preference is to use this particular model versus that particular model, or this particular tool versus that particular tool. So we have to be tool agnostic. However, if you ask us what our preference is, then we will give you a pretty explicit set of tools, and guess what? Miro features very prominently in that list of tools. So the way that we describe it and the way that we talk about it inside of the organization is about going from a signal, so capturing and qualifying the right problem. And that could be talking to a client, capturing that transcript, what's your business problem, what's your particular need, I want to improve customer retention, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And then we use a series of AI skills and agents and Miro boards to go through the process of validating that signal, amplifying it, generating new questions. How can we engage better with this subject? What expertise can we bring as an organization to be able to better address that problem? The second stage is then to start exploring that problem space. And we saw some demos this morning where you could see, well, actually, I want to build a prototype, or I'm going to vibe code something and I'm just going to use it as something that I can put in front of my client and start doing things. We call that the explore phase. And what's most important that comes out of that explore phase, and one of the lessons that we learned in this post-agile world, is the fact that the most important thing is an agent-ready backlog of work. Because when you move on to the next phase, a human is directing agents to go off and do work. So we have some truly talented engineers, but actually when we give them agent-ready backlogs of work and the ability to reason and understand code bases, they can work at such huge productivity levels that we don't call it building, we call it humans governing the output that is produced by AI agents. And then last but not least is the evolve stage. So for the majority of the time, we get really excited because we get to think about building things right at the very beginning of something. So the clickable prototype, what's it going to look like in my hand inside of a mobile app, etc. But the reality is, for the vast majority of the time, systems live in production environments. And those are really, really rich sources of context as you start working out what to do next, where do you go? So Evolve is all about taking that telemetry, thinking about how can I use AI to do predictive analytics or predictive fixes, etc., etc. So in a nutshell, that's Dava Flow. It's my chosen specialized subject. I'll do mastermind on it, and I'll try not to bore you all by talking about it. But how do we do it? So let's unpack this a little bit. So with Dava Flow, Miro was central to everything that we did. That concept, that principle that the team talked about this morning in terms of that visual context, don't underestimate it. So when we were doing the early days of Dava we were having the same issues that people were talking about: PDF documents, Markdown, docs, JPEGs, you name it. It was in lots of different places. The ability to be able to pull things together into a visual context, which allowed different types of stakeholders to collaborate, was key to kind of understanding how to move through to the next level. Now, Miro, although we've seen the great demos earlier of kind of like mermaid diagrams and architecture diagrams and all of those type of things, we've seen high amounts of usage in the Signal and Explore space. So a really great way for people to interact with it. We also, we've written our own sidekicks. So Dava has its own sidekicks. We're users of the flow. We use prototyping. My favorite demo to do in front of clients when I have a lot of time is to create virtual personas, run virtual workshops, take live feedback, update those diagrams in real time in front of teams of people. It's an amazingly powerful way of showing people what you can do. Now, I'm not going to show you a demo, but when I click my finger, you're going to see a video play in the background. It's really, really hard to demonstrate some of these things, especially when you start going, my sidekick's doing this or my flow's doing this. But fundamentally, what you're seeing on the video as it plays behind me is a signal phase that we're conducting for a particular client. So we've got a number of sidekicks which have helped us observe things which are going on for that particular client. We're using the MCP connector to connect into the background to something we call a context warehouse, where we've enriched it with our experience, any work that we've done with them beforehand. Then we are kind of like generating what should happen next in terms of the conversations that we should have with that particular client. Do we think the signal is strong enough? Do we think we have enough evidence that that is the right problem to actually solve as we move forward? And then it's kind of like, okay, so what else? Here's some tasks, here are some activities that we can distribute to humans to go off and capture, or equally, we could direct a sidekick to go off and pull some information back from elsewhere. This is a really, really quick minute and a half way of trying to dash around a Miro board, and I didn't want to induce seasickness by doing it live and scrolling my mouse around. But one of the things that I think was really important for people to realize is that, and again, I've probably said the words too many times, it's that visual context. The ability to bring together people to collaborate in the place where they are most comfortable collaborating really makes a difference, really, really makes a difference. So what did we learn as we've been going on this journey? And we've been doing this for a couple of years now. So one of the things from our perspective was making Dava work for our entire organization wasn't about just giving people training material and going, off you go. That's how you use this. This is the way that you use this sidekick. This is the way that you do that. What we really ended up having to do was to shift the mindset of the people who are using this. And that is an amazingly difficult thing to actually achieve. So, the features that you've seen from Miro or the features you see from OpenAI or Anthropic or others really blow people's minds. But 9 times out of 10, having seen something really clever, someone sits there and goes, and I have no idea where to start. I literally don't know where to start with this. It's just too difficult. So one of the things that you're trying to do is shift that mindset. It's about experimentation, encouraging people to actually put their hands on the keyboard and to start asking questions, collaborating, moving things forward. And the most important thing for people to realize is it's happening. It would be great if we were all kind of like in this kind of like, let's call it the pre-2023 world, where we kind of had a steady base of technology and tools and we knew what was going on. But the rate of change, the way in which AI is impacting everything that we do on a daily basis isn't going to change. So you've got to make people feel a lot more comfortable about the way in which they're interacting with the tools and moving towards that mindset. The other thing is, as an organization that sells systems and solutions to clients, is about reassuring people that you have trust and you have governance and you have control and you have auditability. And these are all really boring words that no one really cares about when they just want to chuck up a prototype onto a Miro board. But actually, it's really, really important. And one of the things that we've discovered as we've gone on this journey, and we've used independent measures, we've used tools, we've used external reference points, the quality of the output that we are now producing is better than the output that we produced when we only had humans. And it's not because the AI is just allowed to go off and do its thing. It's because we're augmenting the ability of humans And they are able to, that split 80-20 thing from earlier, spend more time thinking about the problem, which actually gives a much better output at the end of it. So do not underestimate the power of that mindset change that everybody inside an organization has to go through. And I mentioned this individual earlier, and anyone who was at Canvas in October, you can tell me off because I've reused the same slide twice. This is a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Utley, and he has been in the world of innovation for years. He's at the Stanford D School, great podcast, great newsletter. Sign up to him. He's far more intelligent than me, and I steal all of my best ideas from him. No, that's not true. But fundamentally, one of the things that he talks about is most organizations right now, when they're talking about AI technology, are thinking about value capture. How can I take AI, apply it to my problem, and I might get a 10 to 15% improvement on what I'm doing. I might make content generation a bit quicker. I might make testing a little bit quicker. But fundamentally, that's quite a defensive move. And therefore, in an organization where there's fear and you've not enabled that AI mindset to be set free, you're never going to get the gain that you really expect to get because you're just kind of diminishing it. So what you really have to think about is value creation. So invert the problem. So you start thinking about how is it that I can use this technology to take us to entirely different places. And when I see things working now in a Dava flow engagement when we're working with clients, it is absolutely transformative. As I said, the ability to go into a meeting with a small team, having created prototypes, having come up with ideas, to be able to live validate them in a visual canvas, to be able to take those things into code, and not just generate proof of concepts, but to actually generate things which could be put into production environments. Then you start having that aha moment where you're going, this is what value creation means. It's not just about value capture. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone here. Thank you very much to the Miro team for having me on stage, and I will hand back to Amy.